Hello, welcome to a tasting of this week's new coffee release, which is Masenga Hill from Burundi. This is our penultimate release from Omwani Coffee Importers. I purchased a 5-bag pallet from Omwani a few weeks back, and we're on the 4th release now. So 1 to go until the new crop arrives sometime in the early part of 2024. So what I'm going to do today is something a little different, and rather than brew a filter coffee, I'm going to brew a cafetiere. I thought also what I'll do is I'll brew this on film and talk through a little bit how I would approach a full immersion brew and then do the tasting thereafter. First of all, to brew a cafetiere, what you need is a cafetiere. This is a 1 litre brewer. I tend to use this when I'm at home with my partner Katie, and I always choose a cafetiere on a Sunday morning. It's a very simplistic way of brewing coffee. There's not much that you can get wrong but the grind size and quality of the water. So 2 variables that are super easy to control once you've got your eye into the roaster that you're purchasing coffee from, their coloration, their style of roasting, etc. So I've got a litre brewer. You could choose any size, but we're going to be using a brew ratio of 60 grams of coffee for every litre of water that we'll be using. So therefore we're going to be using 60 grams of coffee for this particular brew today. I would also have a scales. These are some Akaya scales. They're waterproof and they're quite dear, but they can be any bench scales. Preferably you would have, if you are making a purchase on scales, you would use ones that have a 1/10 of 1 gram sensitivity, and if you're brewing a litre or more, you would need at least 1,000 grams total weight. These go up to 2 kilos. Some you can get up to 4 kilos or 6 kilos. Of course, you need some coffee. I have pre-ground coffee today. This is, I've ground about 62 grams of coffee just to make sure that if there's any coffee left within the grinder, that's there, and I should have 60 grams ready to brew. So what I'll do now is I'll just begin building the cafetiere. So I remove the gauze and plunger, make sure that the cafetiere is clean and dry, set the scales on, and I'm going to pour in my 60 grams of coffee, making sure that I get the 60 grams in. There we are, 60 grams. So I then zero the scales, knowing that the weighing scales are now ready for me to pour my water onto. I always take water to 100 degrees Celsius. At sea level, it's a known boiling point, and especially within the roastery today, it's really quite cool. So when you're pouring hot water onto the bed of coffee, what you want is all of that thermal mass getting into the coffee grounds to begin the extraction process. And I have found through investigation over the years that if we were to focus on lower temperatures, 95, 93, there's an awful lot of discussion around that on the internet, that actually practically what happens, and especially in cold environments, is you may attain a temperature inside of the temperature controlled kettle of 93, but by the time you pour that and it hits the bed of coffee, you've easily lost 5 degrees Celsius and sometimes more. So I'd encourage people to take their water to boiling point and use that as their known set point. So what I'll do now is I'll pour the water on. I am also going to have a spoon handy as well to agitate the bed. So here goes. Pardon me. One thing I did forget was a timer. There are discussions on the internet about how long you should brew a cafetiere for. I tend to leave this for a minimum of 10 minutes. Arbitrarily today, I am going to time the brew to see exactly how long it takes, and I'll convey that through to people. So what I'll now do is set the timer and begin the pour. This is a rather large kettle, which I use for cupping. So it's a little oversized for this job today. I'm going to give it a stir. There's about 500 grams or 500 ml of liquid that has just gone into the cafetiere. I'm now going to continue the pour right to the top. Again, another little stir. This stir is not only to make sure that all of the coffee grounds are agitated, but also because of the minerality of our water locally, we tend to find that there's quite a lot of crema. This isn't a crema, but it's more of a foam. The higher level of minerality you have, I've realized that actually it creates a greater depth of foam. So it's a useful thing to have a spoon just to agitate the coffee. Now, I've put in a litre of water to my 60 grams of ground coffee. I've done an agitation at about halfway through. We have a timer set that is a little arbitrary, and now we can just set this to one side to brew, which I'll do over here without burning my fingers, and just talk a little bit about how I've roasted this coffee today. So this is a washed red bourbon from Burundi, Masenga Hill. Much the same as I have done in the previous roasts, I really want to try and emphasize the fruit characteristics of this origin. So I would roast this relatively quickly and have a relatively quick post first crack development time. And those two things will allow a roaster to be able to promote more fruit composition within the cup and allow more of those origin flavors to be retained within the bean rather than being roasted away if you're looking to access more texture and body. So a 10.5 minute roast profile, 1 minute 35 seconds in total development time post first crack. The expectation is going to be similar to the other Burundis that I've released over recent weeks, and that is going to be that we're going to have a very prevalent fruit character, maybe some brown sugars and caramels in the cup, but we'll see when we get through to the tasting. We're approaching 8 minutes in total brew time now, so what I'll do is I'll just bring the cafetiere back over and continue the brew process, which is I take 2 spoons, and much like I do with cupping, I remove the top sort of head layer, and I just, making an awful lot of mess, take that out and pour that away. Now, I do this, while I just quickly wipe up, I do this so that it helps to clean the cup up some. If you don't do that, what you'll find is some of those pieces will be floating in your cup, and it's a nice neat way of just cleaning that cafetiere cup up a bit. The beauty with the cafetiere is that you have an awful lot of texture because the gauze is able to allow small particles through it, and it's those small particles in suspension that add the perception of texture within your mouth. What we don't want is too many of those things around to leave like a murky, muddy taste. And by removing that scum and discarding, that assists somewhat in that process. So what I'll now do is I'll plunge in a nice, controlled, steady way. If you plunge too quickly, what will happen is that some of these particles will escape around the side of the plunger, and we don't want that. So there we are, plunge that down. I also pour a little bit away first. That is, again, another way I've been able to try and clear out some of the opportunity of floating bits within the cup. So let's have a pour. Move that to one side. And have a smell. So on the nose, lots of fruit, red fruits, I think. We've put red apple, and you can get that sort of red-skinned apple characteristic on the nose. And there's also this perception of sweetness as well. It's a real sort of sticky sweetness. So again, on our bag, we've put caramel, you could say brown sugar, you know, that sort of end of the spectrum. A little bit of maybe muscovado, etc. So let's have a quick sip. I'm just giving the cup a touch of a swirl just to make sure if there is any particles in suspension that they're fully integrated into the whole of the cup. Right, wow, so lots of red apple. There's a quite high level of malic acid with this. The red apple is really coming through. It is a very prominent part of this this cup. The red apple is really coming through. It's a very prominent part of this cup profile, certainly on the first sip. I'm just going to pour a touch more. What I tend to do is, when I'm tasting things, taste my way through the coffee as the coffee cools. This is pretty hot. Yes, it's been brewing for 9 minutes or so now, and the cup was partially pre-warmed. In normal terms, I like to fully warm the cup. That's because when I'm at home with my family on a Sunday drinking a cafetiere, I really want to elongate that brewing process and elongate the experience of drinking coffee. However, when we're tasting, we tend to use a colder cup. That really pulls down the temperature of the coffee quickly into a zone whereby we can taste. When things are too hot, the papillae on your tongue can't actually perceive as many of the intricate flavor profiles as one would hope for. And that is a risk with coffee, is that people tend to drink it too hot, where there's too many bittering compounds present. Not that the other flavors aren't available, it's just that your tongue at this point and at high temperatures can't perceive those flavors, textures, etc. So, but I did pour myself a slightly short amount, and I do need a touch more. So let's talk a little more about the coffee. Right, yeah, as it's cooling, that red apple is maybe turning into a little bit of orange as well. And there's a really lingering syrupy caramel in the cup. This obviously is tasting exceptionally well as a cafetiere, but I think it would lend itself pretty well to an espresso too. That syrupy texture will be the thing that helps balance the malic acid, the red apple. Filter brewing as well, I feel this will shine, and those who use AeroPress, I think you'll enjoy this too. So just to recap, Masenga Hill from Burundi, this is the fourth and penultimate release with our opening relationship with Omwani Coffee importers based up in York. So we have one more left, and this will come out in the next couple of weeks. Expect red apple, syrupy texture, a little bit of orange, and some caramel and brown sugar qualities. It would be a very versatile coffee for all methods of brewing. I would have a preference for filter or maybe full immersion, such as cafetiere. I think that's where the balance of this coffee would sit. But those who enjoy other methods, I'm pretty certain would get some degree of enjoyment out of it as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this tasting today, and the fact that I've introduced partially a way of being able to brew a cafetiere. I will do some brewing guides in the future, and this was a little bit of a foray for me to practice how to do this on camera, because I'm not exactly the best person on camera. Anyway, enjoy the coffee, and I'll see you again next time.